town owns. We heard about the traffic that comes and goes weekly, twice a week sometimes, on a beautiful summer day. You're going to have almost every islander go past our house. Almost every islander goes past our house. So it's a pretty busy scene. It's social because they're going and doing the one thing they can do on the property of Washington Island, which is go get rid of their garbage. I used to work for waste management, and I've seen what it looks like when you're a good neighbor. I have operated waste management's solid waste fills, transfer station, a fleet of 45 truck drivers, and I had to have fingerprints, FBI search, all that good stuff happen because we had to be compliant to so many rules and regulations to be a good neighbor. Permitting that takes 28 days to put a mine next to your house is just, I'm without words. I want to bring up a few points that are strongly held in my mind. If you go to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources report on mining and what they know about sand and non-metallic mining, it is irrefutable that there will be migrating dust, diesel particles, there will be a vibratory impact, there will be sound, there will be sand. It just goes on and on. It's a whole lot of good paragraphs that I think you all understand. What it does say is it'll probably disturb the neighbors. I think I can safely say to anybody hearing my voice right now, nobody woke up this morning and said, I want to live next to a mine. I currently have this facing me. I don't want to live next to a mine. As a matter of fact, every single neighboring property that I could muster up the time to talk to in the last 20 days has said they don't want a mine. We're talking about a mine and not the men. This is not about the people. This is about the proposition. The problem here is that time has lapsed since initially that was considered the industrial zone of the island. Time has lapsed. Needs have changed. Even in the last 50 days, there is a full-on 300,000 cubic foot capacity mine just been approved on the island that anybody can buy from. It's not like we don't have enough rock in places on the island. The problem with this place is that there's assumptions of value that are being made, like the comparison to the dump and to the other quarry, and way back when there was propane over there. It's very disparaging because since those old days, I'm going to say comfortably 15 people have come to live around that yellow square. More than 15 people will be impacted negatively. The concern I have for this proposal is very personal. The driveway of exit is next to my old apple trees. I don't think that's going to be real positive, nor has it been buffered in. I'm incredibly concerned about the migrating dust. And for one moment, I'm going to digress, and I'm going to tell you a short story to make my point. My father here in Cincinnati was a manufacturer's rep, and he earned enough money at one point that he went ahead and bought like his second, I think it was a Lincoln Continental. He had a lot of pride in it. And he bought in one of the most affluent, if you will, country gentleman neighborhoods in Cincinnati. And he backed up to the back end of that neighborhood. He finally got way on, what is that, moving on up? He moved on up, but he also lived on the edge of this place. And it happens to be the edge of where there was a rock quarry that once built the loop highway not too far from that area. So gravel is important to have near road construction. I get that. the most important part of gravel is transportation. It's kind of a cheap material, unless you go blowing it up at great expense. My father lived, I kid you not, it must be a quarter mile straight uphill from where the quarry was, meaning as the crow flies up. And he spent the latter part of his retirement cleaning off the dust on his in-ground pool, washing his Lincoln often, wiping down windows more than seasonally. And he talked about the dust. Now, here's the end of my short story. My father died prematurely of asthma and emphysema. He was not a smoker. My father died with a respiratory problem caused by dust that he lived with in his dream home. I can't even tell you about the irony I have in speaking right now. Facing what we are facing, which is irreparable, sacred, irreplaceable, to devalue the lives that have established around this place. We've already seen in that picture, that yellow square right there, all that green is gone. Those are the trees that Jens and his brothers or whoever planted probably in the 60s. They're gone, and a few other things too. The hardwoods, some of those are gone. I can tell you that because I just had my house photographed yesterday. I needed to see this firsthand. And from my house, I see a hole in my neighborhood. I see the horizon of the island. I see the blue water. I see what you can see from the fire tower, the mountain tower, in a picture that shows this place with this surrounding yellow square there. And what I see is a hole already. The biology has been disturbed. We'll never know what that forest land looked like before it was cleared. We saw the stumps, which just look like, the worst. And all I could think was, well, if I was a farmer, I guess it's going to be a good cornfield. 50 feet of canopy was removed easily. 50 feet high. Canopy, gone. Habitat, gone. We're planning on going 25 feet deep in the permit. That's what they're asking for, a hole. The biodiversity of this region, as you can see from this picture, is in play. There's more green than in that yellow square. The deciduous trees are dormant in that picture. They're resplendent in the fall. That applicant owns one of the most beautiful hardwood displays I've ever seen in the fall. I'm challenged. I'm challenged to look at this as a conditional permit and look at the conditions that will be put upon everything else. This is not a little operation on paper. It's really nice to sound like it's just going to be a little of this and a little of that, and it'll only happen every now and then. But when it happens, it happens. It's ruinous. The dust will light on the apple trees. The bees cannot pollinate. It goes downhill from there. And that's my property, my livelihood, my future. And I know with apiaries over on Mountain Road, that pretty little swirly road, there's bees that would be coming to those trees as well. I already know that as I look at those little white sections across the street from the yellow square, all those little white sections, those are homes with children and grandparents. When I look south of my property, there's a couple who bought that house with their elder parents, expecting a future of clean air and clean water. I really don't want to lose track of some really big, important facts, but that's why I have a gentleman here to speak on our behalf. My husband has some things that he wants to share. That's very important to me. I'm quickly paging through my notes to assure that I haven't missed anything. I have a couple favorite sayings. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. There is more than enough resource available for these applicants to run their business without this devastation. There is more than enough resource for all of the islanders to partake in a new quarry already underway. We don't need another one around the corner. I want to also say that when we sit here and listen to all the things that have dotted I's and crossed T's and compliance and adherence and addressings of concerns that are legally going to be problematic, I do not want to be left being the monitor of this business should it be allowed to permit and go through. I don't want to sit on my fence line and have to describe who started early, when the engine blew a hydraulic. Why do I have to have the pair of binoculars for the rest of my life to guard what is critical to me? The aquifer underneath this proposition is fragile. Dolomite, karst, whatever you want to call it, is an open vein to the water table below us. That sacred water that we sit in the middle of, Lake Michigan, that sacred water that we all want to drink. This karst is a direct avenue to the marsh. Let's not fool ourselves about the ground grade. It's going through and it will go fast. Karst is known to not percolate. It permits passage. That's why I have a holding tank on my property. I have a holding tank because karst is not percolating. It's permissible. It allows the material to move quickly. There is so much at threat here. I'm going to have my husband Ted speak. I know James Smith will speak. I want you to know I plan to live on the island and I plan to be a contributor. And this is not about the folks. This is about the proposition. A mine is not a good neighbor. This is no cup of sugar. Thank you.
Are there any questions for her? None?
I have comments, but I'll hold them back.
Okay. Vinny, did you have any questions?
No, I guess the comment I will say is thank you for what you have presented. And I guess one point of clarification is that 28 days is a much shorter, or is not exactly the from start day to final permitting, as the applicant explained as well. They'll have to go through their stormwater permitting through the DNR, as well as what they're working on with the Heinz Emerald. So there are multiple steps to compliance for a permit, not just this step. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I will make a comment to remind individuals that unfortunately state statutes are quite clear. We have to listen to and recognize forms of substantial evidence as defined by the state statutes. I understand this can be a personal issue, but the state has made it quite clear through numerous times, and this is one of the reasons we do have our Corporation Council here today during the meeting to help us stay within that realm. That being said, if Julianne is done, Ted, are you available?
I am here, yes.
State your name and address again.
My name is Ted Gardner. We own property at 1096 Town Line Road on Washington Island, Wisconsin. I'm not quite sure how to follow what my wife just said. Obviously, I'm fully opposed to this. and to the entire proposal in general. I don't know if this is legally referred to as spot zoning, but of course, this is only to be accomplished or indulged in where it is in the public interest and not solely for the benefit of the property owner who requests rezoning. Counties such as Dorr need to avoid a regulatory patchwork in terms of permitted uses for properties. Should be consistency throughout the zoning code as to permitted uses. So this begs the question, is this in the public interest? The answer to this question is obvious to me, and it should be obvious to the members of the committee. You, as a committee, reserve the right to deny any metallic mining permit should it be concluded that the proposed operation will result in any of the following: significant adverse impacts which have the potential to harm public health, welfare, safety, or the environment; significant subsidence or the gradual caving in or sinking of the land; significant deposition to stream or lake beds; or irreparable damage to which cannot be mitigated or avoided to dwellings and other buildings, public or private, public roads, or most importantly, habitat required by endangered species, including ourselves. I understand people on the island need to make a living, but this is just a bad idea. It's poorly thought out, badly located, and totally unnecessary. What is the practicality of this proposal? our entire future plans for the island, including retirement, are basically waiting on your decision. And I'm hoping that you do the right thing and deny this request. However, if you do, in my mind, erroneously decide in favor of this proposal, I ask that you implement the conditions outlined in my letter that should be included in the packet to the board. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Did we lose Vinny?
Mr. Chairman,
All right.
I'm going to try and find here.
that's what I was going to ask. Where is that letter?
I'm going to try and find it.
It's on the second packet, if I remember right.
I think it might be the second packet too.
You gotta go back.
Vinny, are you still there?
I'm here.
I'm,
I just don't
can you
see.
hear me?
I just don't see you. So
Sorry about that. I hit my video instead of my feet.
just wanted to make sure we didn't lose you. I read it too.
Is it in the second
I
packet?
think it's in the second packet. Yeah.
Here's a letter. Okay, yeah.
There it is.
What page is it on?
It's your second packet, and it starts on page 14.
Okay.
It's the packet that
Here it is.
Okay, what second packet? Because
it's the packet that would have gotten pushed to your Chromebooks last night, but not posted on the web until this morning. So it didn't get on the web for some reason.
that's different than this other one?
Correct.
Yep.
Additional documents. Came
Yeah, I don't even have that on here.
Well, I've got Ted's letter up on the screen.
Who's?
Mr. Gardner, the person that just testified, he said
It's on the
that.
big screen.
So,
Oh, yeah, I got that one.
oh,
I'm sorry.
The header says Ted Gardner.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
maybe it ended up in both packets.
No, it's in the second.
You might comment you've written.
There's only two packets, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, yeah,
I have a third
I've got
one for
it.
a different reason that I'm going to actually close if I can figure out.
Okay. Yeah, I have it here.
It's actually 2 pages long.
Yep.
Never mind. I'm not going to close that other one because I can't.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Vinny.
Thank you. Are we able to look through some of these points as we're kind of doing right now in the letter, bringing it up? Many of the conditions that he's suggesting are things that are met through both the DNR processing, the soil and water mine reclamation program. So that might be useful maybe in our meeting time later in our decision time to kind of see where those are already checked off through other permitting processes. Thank you.
Any other questions? Jen, I've got a question for you. Just out of curiosity more than anything else, it seems unusual that the lots, including the one that you bought with the house on it, and the L-shaped lot are both listed as light industrial. Obviously, some long-term decision making. Those zoning regulations bring quite a few options that are not necessarily friendly to residential activity either. I'm curious if you had considered rezoning those two lots to a residential listing.
I think I can have my wife, Julianne, answer that question better than I.
I would love to speak to that. I have wanted to do an entrepreneurial effort on the island, and certainly I would have to go through processes that would allow me to exercise what I can and can't do on the light industrial lots. My intention is to, at this point, do no more than add, if you will, a building or two storage that would enable me to put out the raised beds that I sell for food growth. One Small Garden is my business. I put out food gardens for others, and I would expect there'll be a few recipients and interested clients. If I have the orchard going the way I'd like to, who knows what'll happen? Maybe I'll have a full-on apiary, so the building's there. So what do I think about the light industrial and rezoning it to residential? No, I don't see a need to do that. What I don't understand is why we would want to push further more light industrial. What I knew when I bought those two light industrial lots, the L shape, was that I knew where Jens's building was and I knew where Tom's building were. And I knew that there was general ag everywhere else. I knew what I was buying up until this permitting process was brought to me. I knew what was out there. I researched the region. We understand where we live. The problem is this is non-compatible with living. It has no naturalist in mind. I love the fact that we're hearing people want to save nature and they'll just do the best they can, but no.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? You don't have to.
Well, we have a Corey. Everybody knows that. Dad Corey until he was 92 years old. Fine health, fine lungs, no problems.
Personally.
To have one person that got sick, that can happen anywhere for any reason.
No discount.
I've got people coming out to my quarry. It's been there since 1946. They come in there, they don't even know it had been there. They didn't know it was there. All right. My quarry is on 40 acres. It encompasses about 5 acres for the quarry. So to say it disrupts, some can. I wouldn't say it doesn't, but they don't. They're so regulated by the county and by the state. And the mine is not next door to her house. It's over 500 feet away. And then she wants to stop, or this family, this couple, they want to stop a local business, but they want to come in from outside and start their own business. I have a problem with that. I'm sorry. And I don't mean to be argumentative or hostile, but, I'm sorry. It needs to be said. It needs to be said. You've got a local abiding by the laws and the rules, going through all the channels. I've talked to people up north. I made calls that feel it's a needed endeavor. So, and to have an outsider come in and say, I don't want them to have their business, but I want to come in and start my own business. I'm sorry, I have a problem with that.
Maybe during a discussion we can go further into that.
All right. Well, you asked, I was gonna bite my tongue, but
Am I allowed to respond to that?
It was more of a comment than anything else. At this moment, there is a rebuttal opportunity as well.
Thank you.
So if you want to take some time to think about it, you can. I guess what I would do, if Vinny has no other questions, I would move on to Jim Smith. Are you online? Oh, wait, she's got to turn you on there for voice. Okay, Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, give us your name and address and go ahead.
My name is Attorney James Smith. Address 1236 Bluebird Street, Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, 54235. Thank you, Chairman Ennigal, members of the Resource Planning Committee. I'm here today on behalf of Ted and Julianne Gardner and other residents of Washington Island who are concerned about the proposed conditional use permit. Here to speak in opposition to the granting of that conditional use permit. Out of respect for committee members' time, I intend to limit my testimony today to those issues that I believe are most pertinent to the matter at hand. Specifically, I'd like to address the proposed industrial mining operations' effect on property value and strong opposition, public opposition to the proposed mine. I'll also be briefly touching on health and environmental concerns as they relate to the proposed mine and addressing the reassurances given by the applicant to the Washington Island Planning and Zoning Committee and Washington Island Town Board. With respect to the proposed mine's effect on residential property value, if I could have page 152 of the packet on screen. Thank you. Now, Door County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance Section 11.04 sub 5B provides specific criteria for the Resource Planning Committee to evaluate to aid in the review of and decision-making regarding a proposed conditional use permit. The first criterion, 11.045B1, asks whether the proposed project will adversely affect property values in the area. The answer to this question I submit to you, members of the committee, is a resounding yes. Rock mining operations, including limestone and gravel production, have considerable adverse effects on residential quality of life due to elevated noise and dust levels resulting from dynamite blasting and increased truck traffic. I have submitted for the committee's consideration 2 studies which examine the relationship between a house's price and its distance from a nearby rock mine. Now, I'll admit these studies are scientific and not what any of us would consider to be light reading. However, the conclusions drawn from these studies are easily digestible. And that is, there are statistically and economically significant property value suppressing effects of being located near an operation rock mine, which gradually decline to insignificant near values at roughly a 10-mile distance. Now, a few moments ago, Julianne was cautioned that testimony must be based on substantial evidence. Earlier in the hearing, Mr. Parent touched on potential effect on property value. However, in doing so, Mr. Parent provided no evidence whatsoever that property values would not decrease. The only thing offered was speculation, and I would submit to the committee that this is not substantial evidence. What the evidence shows, according to one study, is that all else being equal, a house located a mile closer to a rock mine is priced, on average, at about a 2.3 to 5.1% discount. Overall, that study found that the proximity to rock mines does matter for residential property values. The other study I included in the packet found that a residential property located a half mile from a gravel mine would experience an estimated 20% reduction in value. Those properties within 1 mile would have a 14.5% reduction. 2 miles from the mine, an 8.9% reduction, and 3 miles, a 4.9% reduction. Now, earlier, some anecdotal evidence was offered that some people just don't know that mines are around and are surprised to find that a mine isn't where they perhaps expected to see one. And while I do respect the anecdotal evidence, I don't know that that is what qualifies as substantial evidence. This second study I'm referring to determined that the loss in property value results from the negative consequences of the mining operation and reflects the deterioration in the area's quality of life solely to the operation of the gravel mine. Even if homeowners do not move as a result of the gravel mine, they will lose homeowner equity as the potential sale price of their house is less. If I could get page 21. Thank you.
Is it this one or this?
The one above. Yes, thank you. Extrapolating the conclusions of these studies to the matter at hand, I examined approximately 37 properties, all located within a 1 mile radius of the proposed mine site. If the conditional use permit is approved, the total loss in property value, according to these scientific studies, for these 37 properties alone, which doesn't even include all of the properties within a mile, but these are just 37 ones that I examined for purposes of this meeting, that total loss in property value would range from over $250,000 on the low end to almost $1.4 million on the high end. By approving the applicant's conditional use permit, the committee would essentially be lowering all property values in the area of the mine, with the exception of that of the applicant. Now, briefly touching on public opposition, the criterion under 11.045B17 asks the committee to consider the impact of the proposed project on public health, public safety, or the general welfare of the county. And while the conditional use permit before the committee has received support from the applicants and their engineer, the opposition from residents on the island has been overwhelming. One item I think that's particularly important to address under this is the proposed easement, and what at least my understanding is that there will be storage of heavy machinery on Mr. Jordan's property to the south, which would effectively make that parcel part of the mining operation. That would mean that the mining operation would be within 50 feet of Ted and Julianne's property. Of course, part of the concern expressed in the letters to the committee relates to health concerns. As part of materials I submitted to the committee for their review, if I could get page 22. This is a safety data sheet for crushed limestone. In reading it, it's clear that residents who live near the proposed mine site are justifiably concerned about the potential adverse health effects of the mine. To highlight a few concerns they may have, this safety data sheet indicates that chronic exposure to nuisance dust may enhance susceptibility to respiratory tract infections. Respirable dust can cause bothersome deposits in the nasal passages. Nuisance toxicity from physical overloading of the respiratory clearance mechanisms, and significant deterioration of pulmonary function and chronic bronchitis can develop with prolonged exposure to dust in excess of established limits. Additionally, environmental concerns abound. If I could get page 94 on the screen. The land on which the applicants proposed to conduct a mining operation is limestone, of course. What the research shows is that karst systems, such as the land on which the proposed mine would be, have very low self-purification capabilities, which makes karst water very susceptible to pollution. Furthermore, chlorine can substantially modify the routing of recharge, and water quality can be degraded. This is significant to property owners in the area, as well as the potential effect on the Heinz emerald dragonfly. As shown on the map on screen right now, the proposed mining site is located in an area that contributes groundwater to the Heinz emerald dragonfly larval habitats. And as shown on that map, that area has a high recharge potential. Now, in response to some of the concerns that were raised in front of the Washington Island Town Board, specifically in a letter dated May 12th, 2020, as it relates to the Heinz emerald dragonfly, the applicants, in an attempt to reassure the town board and WISAP, they indicate that they had a conversation with Greg Colthurst, and he would require machines not to leak fluids, from the letter here, plus require daily inspections of any machines or trucks, no fuels, fluids stored on site, machines not left in a lower excavated site. And I wonder, I question here, who is going to be responsible for these daily inspections? Is this something that is left to the owner operator of the mine? Because that does not seem like a recipe for successful oversight. I would submit to the committee that the evidence before it can lead to one conclusion, and that is denial of Mr. Jordan's application for a conditional use permit. Looking at the significant reduction in property values alone, not to mention the various health, environmental, etc. concerns, that is, I believe, the appropriate conclusion. However, if the permit is approved, despite the loss in property value, I would respectfully request that the board consider and implement the conditions listed in Ted Gardner's letter to the board, as well as taking to other considerations based on the proximity to the mine. I thank the committee for their time and attention to this matter as very important. And with that, conclude my remarks.
Okay, are there any questions for Jim?
I have one.
Vinny, go ahead.
Thank you. I am wondering, as far as the safety data sheets that you referenced in your presentation, if you found anything that in these that was regarding like distance from the work site. I think safety data sheets are typically made for a work site and for the workers on the site. I'm just wondering if you had found any evidence or information about distance from the site that this information would still be pertained to. Thank you.
Sure. Not specifically for those who are off-site. However, I think one can extrapolate from the concerns listed in the safety data sheet, especially considering that the proposed easement is all of 50 feet from Ted and Julianne's property. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jim, you supplied these all these documents in the second package, correct?
That's correct.
Dragonfly one and the safety data and so forth, correct?
Correct.
And I've noticed a lot of those reports are, relatively older. 2006, 8, 2002. One was 2017. There hasn't been any more up-to-date activities as far as just to see how status has changed.
These were the most recent that my research revealed. However, I would say that, a research paper from August of 2017, I'm referring to the one titled "The Value Undermining Effects of Rock Mining on Nearby Residential Property." That isn't very old, and if there's more current research that presents a different conclusion, obviously I'm willing to hear it, but I don't think a 3-year-old article is not even 3 years old is dated, at least not in this field.
The only reason I really kind of bring it up is I remember these same kind of discussions occurring back with the wind turbine articles and zoning ordinances throughout Northeast Wisconsin. And, 4 years later, you see, lots being built on, sold, being divided, sold, built on, and so forth immediately around them as well. And I was just wondering if there was some more current update information possibly, but not surprised that there probably isn't.
No, in fact, I think that this is something that it's very much a niche area. And in fact, in the abstract to the article I just referenced, they state that this paper provides the first estimates of the effects of rock mining on local residential property values. And so I don't know that this is something that a lot of people, it's a lot of people's life's work for, but I still think it's relevant.
Remind me, what was the radius that the lot evaluations went down in? Was that 1 mile space?
Sure. So the valuations, they found that within a half mile, there'd be a residential property located a half mile. There'd be a 20% reduction. 1 mile, a 14.5% reduction. 2 miles, it drops to 8.9%, and 3 miles, a 4.9%.
The reason I ask is the applicant made a comment about there being a dump, a town quarry, and some other property within a mile, I believe, of this location as well, which would one would think would also be effective on property values. And maybe
Sure. Sure, absolutely. And you know, they may, but this, I don't think this, that fact negates the fact that the property values would, you know, lower even further, because the spreadsheet that I put together, which I believe was
21 or something like that.
21. Yep, great memory. You know, those are values, estimated fair market values from either the Door County land records or real estate websites. And so those values that you see under the EFMV column are already taking into account whatever disamenities, as they're referred to, are in the area, whether it's a dump or another mine. Those are already accounted for.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of Jim? Thank you, Jim. Are there any more documents submitted since in opposition?
Not besides what was in the packet that was posted this morning.
Okay.
So it doesn't sound like everybody had reviewed all of it. There were some letters in opposition. There was a large packet from Attorney Smith. So that's it.
Okay. Do we want to take 5 minutes yet, or okay? Right now? Okay. We're going to take 5 minutes. Oh, hold on.
Oh, I just wanted to. Chair Enigal and there had been one other person that indicated Carol and George Johnson did not realize there was a deadline by which they needed to register to testify in opposition, but she just texted me and said that everything they have to say has already been said, so they do not feel that they need to take it.
Great. I appreciate that they were listening and were able to respond back to you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
That being said, for that individual, although they say everything has been addressed that they were going to bring up, they should still be allowed to rebut if they care to, even though they didn't speak here, wouldn't you think? If something comes up in rebuttal?
In this case, I think maybe yes.
We're going to make an exception, and I'd be fine with that as well.
I mean,
okay, so Carol and George, if that came through, the chair is allowing you the right in the rebuttal round to speak if you feel the need to do so at that point. The trick is going to be for me to figure out which caller you are, because it doesn't identify by phone numbers. So if you can figure that out on your end, let me know.
Maybe in this case, I was just going to say, if you could send her a text and so she can figure out which line entry she has to turn on at that point in time. Otherwise, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and do the rebuttal. So between Julian, Tom, and Steve, figure out who wants to speak first when we get back.
Everybody else that's remaining on the line for the second hearing. So there will be a rebuttal round for this first hearing, and then we'll move into the Chapter 14 text amendments. I can't predict exactly what time that will occur, but it shouldn't be hopefully too long. And I'm going to have the same issue with those of you that registered to testify. I thought I would be able to see your phone numbers, but if you have called in, I'm going to have to guess who to unmute when we get to you. So if anybody can think of a way to go online and figure that out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I can take
If I have a question before we break. Are we?
Vinny has a question.
Vinny, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I was just saying, are we going right into the Chapter 14, or are we making our decision on this before we do that? I thought we said we were doing that in the beginning, so I just wanted to check. So people know to stay on or not.
I think we'll have a brief discussion on with the intent of making a decision right away or postponing or whatever that might be, so that people that are online are able to be aware of that rather than waiting to the end of this next case.
Okay, great. Thank you.
How come you're hobbling?
It just locks up.
Oh.
Takes a while to get.
Say, did Connie and Mary get their boat in yet? They have it at the marina?
It's in, and they took it on a trial run yesterday.
Where'd they go?
Just, I don't know, out in the bay, and they, just check everything out. They said everything's fine.
Is it a tad faster than their
And it
sailboat?
was so nice to listen.
I think so. And I don't think they're gonna go down by the quarry and go back and forth from the lighthouse to the quarry back and forth like they used to, but
Now, they can trailer that. That's a 26-footer.
yeah, but it's until fall. They're gonna put it in once and take it out in the fall. But they can trailer it, yeah. They store it in their building down by the airport.
I would like to see that because we saw there was a 26-footer across from us when we had ours.
Yeah.
And it's smaller, but it hit everything. It had heat and air and a whole shot, full kitchen.
Yeah.
Just on a smaller
Well,
scale.
his health situation with his knee and his shoulder, it was getting too difficult to operate. So now he can just operate the throttle.
I maybe shouldn't have said that about it. I'm sorry. You got somebody coming in from outside who wants to stop a local.
Well, I understood what you were saying.
And yet they want to come in and start their business.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I want to do that to somebody else. Why were they thinking they can do that to us? It's just not right.
Well, I don't know. They're in rebuttal. They're going to talk about how they can keep the dust down with water. They're going to have it on site.
I'm right across the road from 3 quarters, and I never see any dust. Of course, the winds are prevailing winds are westerly, out of the west, so I wouldn't see them. But
I don't know.
Dad's been there since I was 46 or 47. They got in that location. And even to this day, I've got people coming out there. Oh, I didn't know this was here. Now I'm not crushing, so it's a little different. But I never.
But are they going to crush where the quarry is or over by his buildings?
They're going to ship it out. We have to ask them on that.
Yeah, then they are pretty close to her property.
He explained that they would maybe do some. Yeah, we got to ask them on that.
I have to ask you. He said that maybe they'd blast once or twice a year.
I figured.
So, are you and the Wolves kind of lightening up on your face mask and distancing? Are you guys socializing?
We've been over on their deck and staying 6 feet apart.
What? That's right.
We've been staying 6 feet apart.
Yeah, well, like we are. We can still have a cookout and socialize.
Yeah, the issue is as you get more drunk, the 6 feet get shorter.
That's possible.
No, I just then in this when I'm sitting even in the car, I have to be careful quite often to make sure it doesn't act goofy when I first get up. And then it's fine, once I get it moving.
Yeah.
Back when I was a child, I fell down the stairs out by the house with a gash that long on my knee, chipped part of the cartilage out of the knee. And that's always been floating around inside there until probably about 20 years ago when I was fishing with my motorcycle. My now brother-in-law and a friend stopped by and it was Memorial Weekend. I was down here at the dock where the museum is. And I turn around and get up and
Any show, can you hear us?
the young.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay.
Okay. So as long as everybody's back again, we'll go back and reconvene, and it'll do the rebuttal time. So between Julian, Tom, and Steve, which one wishes to speak first?
Tom and Julian, I just unmuted you, but you told me you have to go first.
Steve is going to go first. Thank you for asking. I'll go second if that's all right.
Okay. Steve?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I will try and keep my comments brief here. I know there was some discussion at the Washington Island planning level and a little bit today about this being spot zoning, but I guess I would argue that there are 6 parcels to the south of the proposed quarry site that are all zoned as light industrial, and the comprehensive plan future land use map shows this particular parcel as being designated as light industrial as well. So I would argue that this is not spot zoning. And I understand, you've got the noon, the day before deadline to register to speak. And I understand with this being a learning process and everything that the couple that didn't realize they were supposed to do that, I have no problem at all with them commenting if they'd like to during rebuttal. Because again, this is a learning experience for us. But my problem is more with having 150 pages of documents dumped at 3:30 yesterday and not being aware of it until this morning. It didn't give me time to review it, much less make a lot of comments on it. But I do have a few that I would like to bring up. In terms of land value, the one thing to keep in mind about this quarry, and it's somewhat unique in the fact that this is a very limited use, very limited intensity that's proposed compared to what I would call a typical quarry. And the study or calculations that Attorney Smith was showing, from what I could see, was based on 3 fairly large quarries, one of which was 510 acres. Versus ours, which is 3.5 acres. Obviously, a 510 acre quarry, you can't hide it. It's going to be visible, and it's going to have impacts on neighboring property values. Whereas ours at 3.5 acres, wooded buffer to the west, I really do think it's going to be hidden, and the fact that it is hidden and screened is going to minimize, if not totally eliminate, any reduction in land values. In terms of the recharge to the areas that are breeding grounds for Heinz Inlet dragonfly, again, we're talking about a 3.5 acre site. That's when it's fully built out. It'll be done in phases, probably will be restored in phases. But again, the maximum we'll have exposed is 3.5 acres. As I look at the map and do a rough calculation, it's about a 1,500 acre drainage basin to those wetlands. So we're talking about a quarry that's about 0.2% of the total area that will recharge that area. So I just don't see that this quarry is going to have a negative impact on the dragonfly, especially if we implement any requirements that the DNR may come up with. Then if you would go to the second packet of information that was submitted, if you could go to page 122. And if you look at the very top, it says, in broad terms, there are 3 situations where quarries can be located. 1 on flat ground, which is what we are. 2 along or inside or into the side of a valley, and 3 on the side of a hill. In most situations, quarries excavated into flat ground have a relatively small impact on geomorphology. So I would argue that of all the potential sites, ours is the most desirable one to actually construct a quarry. If you go to page 123, the second column says the technology of rock blasting is highly developed, and when blasting is properly conducted, most environmental impact should be negligible. By following widely recognized and well-documented limits on ground motion and air concussion, direct impacts from ground shaking and air concussion can be effectively mitigated. Here again, we'd be relying on the expertise of the blasters to ensure that that's done in an appropriate fashion. If you then go to page 124, towards the bottom of the third column, it says a carefully prepared and implemented dust control plan commonly can reduce impacts from dust. Carrying over into column 4, controlling fugitive emissions commonly depends on good housekeeping practices rather than control systems. Techniques include the use of water trucks, sweepers, and chemical applications on haul roads, control of vehicle speed, and construction of windbreaks and plantings. All of those are features that we will include in our site. And then lastly, if you go to page 128, on the right-hand side under groundwater, the second paragraph, it says the major impact of quarrying in the karst-saturated zone relates to quarry dewatering and the associated decline of the water table. And that was the point I was getting at in my initial presentation, that the real danger to the groundwater aquifer in karst situations is when the water table and the bottom of the quarry are equal. In our case, we've got a 36-foot separation between the bottom of the quarry and the water table. So I think the impacts, again, on the water table and groundwater aquifer are going to be very minimal. And then I guess my last comment is, and this has been discussed somewhat today, is the fact that in addition to any approvals by you, we will need approval from Soil and Water. We'll need approval from the DNR. We have prepared a reclamation plan, which spells out exactly how the property will be reclaimed after it is no longer an active quarry. And there's a financial assurance that's typically required to make sure that even if the contractor, for whatever reasons, would fail to reclaim the site, there are funds available to make sure that that happens. So I think, based on all my comments, that again, due to the small nature of, in terms of the size of this quarry, the low intensity, I think it is an appropriate site and would warrant your approval. And with that, I guess I would turn it over to Julian, unless you've got more questions for me.
Before we go to Julian, let's see if any members have questions. Vinny?
I just need a second to get my question together, but I guess just a point of clarification in what is being presented here in the pages you referred to. As far as the drainage basin and recharge area, I've kind of heard those terms mixed up in the course of this between surface water and groundwater, where I think what we're looking at is what is the groundwater contribution, since that is what impacts the high level dragonfly, not that surface water couldn't, but they thrive in groundwater fed wetlands. So I guess it's just a point of clarification in all of this that we're looking at groundwater, not surface water runoff. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, I got 2 questions for you.
Sure.
Remind me. Oh, sorry, hold on. Come on. Some of my mic got turned on my tablet. What is karst area in the grand scheme of York County?
It's a different type of feature in the dolomite bedrock that makes it more susceptible to water transfer at a quicker rate than you might see in normal dolomite. As far as the overall impacts, I'm not that familiar with it, but I know it's always a concern that's raised with groundwater issues in Door County.
Well, I guess would it be safe to say that most of Door County is considered karst?
I think there are karst features throughout much of Door County, yes.
Okay. And in any case, are found in rock areas, correct?
Yes, yes.
One of the presentations done, documents provided by Jim was in reference to the dragonfly. One of my concerns is part of one of the maps, and I don't remember what page that was on, showed basically this this lot within that colored area. Page ahead of that. There you go, that's it right there. If I'm reading that correctly, the top picture is the easier one. What, if anything, can you speak? And then I'll, if the other two can answer the question. Can you speak that means something that might affect the DNR allowing or not allowing, actually preventing this from being permitted? Specifically to Stephen, and as the other two come to speak, they can answer the question as well.
Yeah, and I have not spoken myself directly with the DNR. Julian has. Obviously, this will impact their decision or their recommendations. The point I was trying to make though earlier is, if you look at that orange area, you're probably talking about 1,500 acres that drains to those two marshes. And we're talking about exposing, at the very worst, if the entire quarry was opened up, 3.9 acres. So that's where I came up with the 0.2% of that entire drainage basin would be our quarry. So the impacts of 0.2%, I think, would be pretty minimal, especially if we adhere to whatever recommendations the DNR comes up with, such as keeping equipment out of the quarry, not fueling in the quarry, making sure there are no leaking hoses, things like that. So I think the impact's going to be minimal, and my expectation is the DNR is going to come up with recommendations as opposed to a recommendation to deny.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Steve. Who wishes to speak next?
I think Julian said he would.
Okay. Julian, give me your name and address again.
Again, my address is 2071 West Arbor Road, Washington, Iowa, Wisconsin, 54246. Okay, thank you. And the one map, I believe, at the county that Greg sent me seemed to show within this property in that buffer zone that we were referring to for the dragonfly. As I remember, this is again going back to factual, but it may be worth checking. The whole parcel that we're referring to in this 10-acre parcel, I believe it was only a third or a half is out of that buffer zone, excuse me, on that particular map. So if that's splitting hairs a bit, but at least the whole thing, at least on the county map that I looked at, the overlay did not include the whole parcel. Already in my sand gravel quarry that I have in more of the western middle of the island, I know Jim, good questions, who's going to watch over this. I already deal with the state, I already deal with the federal government, and I already deal with the county, and I have to fill out forms and do the appropriate follow-ups and things. So, I know trust but verify, I understand that, but I also do my job. So just want to throw that in there. In terms of valuation of property, I know there's different directions that people come at this. I know I was a real estate broker for 20 years here on the island. I never heard, with all the quarries that were going back then, I never heard, and back then there were probably half a dozen true quarries. I never saw a property not sell or really lose value that I'm aware of, that I can remember. And we talked to a broker up here about this fact, and he has not seen that either. This was just this last week. So there may be exceptions, but this is what he said. In that there are other quarries nearby with the town, the new one, things like that. And things seem to be selling and not losing value. I'm not sure how to play that part of the formula that we're referring to. Just a couple more points here. With the sand and gravel quarry that I have, We have an old crusher, 1956, but my father crushed for 40 years, if not longer, and never had breathing problems. He died at 86 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which, cancer ran in his family, unfortunately. He smoked. He mixed powdered asbestos when he was young at 16 for pipe fitting. So he never had a problem. I've crushed for 40 years, and other than allergies, I don't have a problem. My wife has asthma and does not struggle with it, and we are within the confines of my property. And I do not hear complaints about dust from adjoining property owners. At least they've never told me. So that is it. If there's any questions from what I just said, I'm available. Thank you.
Questions? Vinny? What's the current use of the property that's to the south?
I'm sorry, which, to the south? Oh, Tom's property that joins. Yeah, it's storage buildings. It's zoned light industrial. It's storage buildings and, yeah. I don't know if that answers.
Not a construction-related activity. Okay.
No, he has his payloader there, stores it sometimes, or his speeding plan. He stores some things there, but no, it's not a working factory kind of a situation. No.
Okay. There are no other questions. Tom, do you wish to speak?
1 second, he's walking over. He's almost here.
I don't believe I have anything to add other than that property up until last year or maybe 16 months ago housed, it had about 120,000 gallon capacity for gasoline and fuel oil on my property next door, and I've taken down, it was called a bulk plant. I took the bulk plant down and put up storage buildings on the plant that's next door, or the property that's next door to where the proposed quarry will be.
Any questions for Tom? Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Fisher here. Where is, now it's a small quarry that you're proposing, small amount of crushing. Where is the crushing, the majority of the crushing going to be carried out? If I remember the conversation earlier, the stone, after being blasted, was going to be transported to where the crusher is now, or explain that to me a little bit better.
Okay. Well, I'd like to get two products out of the pit. If we did a light charge, we've got a lot of houses that are looking for like a riprap material that could be used along the beaches. And then we need concrete gravel for our concrete plant. If we were to crush on the premise there, we would crush enough. I mean, we had talked to a crushing company to crush for a week or two. They could crush enough for 5 years for us. They told us in a week they could crush 5 years of material for us. And if we couldn't afford to have them come up and crush, we were going to haul the necessary material over to Julian's pit and have him crush it there, because the concrete plant is actually in Julian's pit.
And where is that located? Is that parcel south of the proposed quarry?
No, it's in the center of the island, right by town, right behind the baseball field. 2203 West Harbor Road. Actually, Julian's house where he lives is part of the quarry.
Okay, when you say riprap for shore property, you mean bigger slabs, right?
Right. We were when I talked to the blaster, he was saying that he could put a real light charge because we were looking for bigger rock. We weren't looking to have it, turned into, gravel right off the get-go. We were looking for bigger stuff that we could put along the beaches. I've only got 5 customers right now that are interested in that type of material, but we don't have that on the island. Right now, we get it from Julian's pit, and it's natural rock that's rounded, and we're looking for more of a fracted rock that would, lock together for the erosion issue that we're all dealing with in Door County.
Sure, I got it, thank you.
Biz?
Yeah, Tom, Richard earlier. How many total months out of a year are you talking about wanting to operate the quarry?
We normally open up the the concrete plant at the earliest, the beginning of May, and we close before it freezes in November. So we were thinking we buy license plates from June to November.
So we're talking, I just did a quick math, we're talking 6 months.
Yes, sir. We wouldn't be in the pit that much. That's just when we need the gravel for the concrete business. I mean, at the most it would be is for that 6 months, because that's when the concrete plant's open.
Well, that's what Steve said, that it would be limited operation, and so you got 6 months through the end of fall and all of winter, and then getting into the spring toward May.
Yes, I mean, if we were granted a permit, we would probably haul, a couple hundred yards of stone to Julian's pit, and then it may take us a month or 2 or 3 months to go through that, and then like today we got 1 load of stone, which would last us a couple days. We usually get about 2 to 3 loads a week from off island in order to use for the concrete plant.
So the blasted stone that you might use for riprap, like selling it to people on their shoreline for protection, are you planning on doing any, after it's blasted, any extra cutting on it?
No.
So you're going to take it out of the quarry as you can, the way it comes out as it's blasted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question also.
Vinny?
Thank you. In the application, it mentions that you will be using the property adjacent just to the south. And then that was stated again as far as having the equipment and machinery stored there. And then comment was given that would maybe be included as part of the mine operation. I guess I need clarification maybe from Mariah on is that property part of this application, because it's included? Is saying that everything will be stored there basically. And then if that's the case, through the reclamation plan, the DNR permitting, is all of that also including the parcel that everything will be stored on for the operation? Thank you.
I don't know. This is Mariah. I was just going to comment that we don't normally, when a mine is being authorized, we don't generally worry about if they're going to take the trucks or the equipment or whatever off-site and park them or store them somewhere else. So I don't think it really matters that they would be next door. I guess if you had any concerns about other activities that might happen on that property, that maybe the condition could be attached that you're only authorizing actual mining and related activities on the land in question. Because I believe the application was just the one that Tom sounded like he was going to chime in.
No, we were only trying to use the property next door to be able to park the equipment inside. There's 2 storage buildings there, just to be able to park the stuff inside and keep it. Right now, we put the truck in, inside one of the buildings at night, just so they're not sitting outside. So, and that's primarily, we're just looking to keep them out of the sun, out of the weather, and etc.
I guess the other part of that is being if that's the only driveway to access the mining operation, and then everything that needs to leave the operation, I'm just wondering how, as far as dust and noise, how that impacts the neighboring property if it's not even listed on the mine application as part of the operation. I guess if materials exiting it, I feel like it is part of the operation. I understand the parking, but it's the truckloads leaving.
I believe in that application that Steve Parent drew up is part of what we have to do is remove the driveway that's there, which is kind of a dirty gravel, and install a new driveway so that we don't have the dust. It's an easement, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I guess, Mariah, is there any like zoning concern with large trucks of mining material leaving a property that's not zoned or doesn't have the mine permit? I don't know. Don't have experience with this, so thank you.
I think if the easement is written to specifically allow for the activity, and since it was included in the site plan, I'm trying to think of another time where we've done something like that. We certainly have, not for quarries, but we certainly have other uses that use easements where it's on a different lot. So I guess it doesn't. Yeah, different.
I guess my concern is just that as that action happens and it's a part of commerce and business, and it's puts the activity or piece of the activity of mining much closer to the neighboring property. So I'm just questioning it. Thank you.
Okay.
I believe the reason we were trying to move the driveway onto the my property is so that you can't look down the driveway and look down into a pit. Or into the pit. So we were trying to eliminate the road visibility just so that it wasn't accessed, through line of sight.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tom. We'll go into the people in opposition to it. Julianne Gardner, are you on? Are you there?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank you all for your deliberations. It deserves serious concerns and thoughts. I'm going to reiterate, just because it was doesn't mean it should be. I am not denying anybody a job, a lifestyle. I'm not asking you to protect my interests as a matter of not allowing somebody else to have their interests. I'm asking you to see that this is incongruous. There are more people living around that yellow square than myself. I think we're clear that the materials are available outside of this proposition, so it's not going to put anybody out of business. Those material costs are always passed through to the customer. I couldn't help but catch the tone of questioning if I'm an outsider. I couldn't help but catch the tone of questioning my intentions. I'm sad for that. The fact of the matter is, this will harm me personally. The fact of the matter is, this will harm everyone around that area. Everyone. This is no small operation on the scale of relativity. It's a big deal. I ask you, would you want to wake up in the morning and find out that your neighbor wants to put in a quarry? I'm pretty sure I know the answer. I know what NIMBY is, not in my backyard. This one's in my backyard. I had no idea I would come to this moment today. Not because I'm ignorant, not because I'm naive, but because I cannot believe this proposal can be taken seriously at the expense of everyone else around it. I want to get along. I want to live there. I'm not denying anybody anything. If anything, I'm bringing something to the game. I am not an outsider. I'm invested. I really don't know what else to say. It's a bad idea at the wrong time. There'll probably never be a good time to put a mine next to people who live there. It's a bad idea. it's not appropriate. It should be denied. And there's a lot of reasons. But sheer sensibility has to say, this is an intrusion. This is a taking. This is an assumption of a right that destroys others' rights. This has been a harmful experience for everyone because it's so aggressive. This isn't just a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's a mining operation with the permit that's transferable to any major corporation today. I appreciate the investment in one's property.
Julia, a reminder, rebuttal is typically related to the comments made.
Okay, I'm not an outsider.
Do you have anything else to say relative to the other statements made by the applicants?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of her?
I have a question. Thank you.
Go ahead.
If this is appropriate in rebuttal, just let me know if it's not, but since you know this property well, that yours is adjacent to it, and you mentioned that there's already been a lot of cutting of the hardwood forest, I'm assuming, or maybe the evergreens as well. One of the criteria we look at is whether the proposed project leads to major change in natural character of the area through the removal of natural vegetation, alteration of the topography. And you did mention that it created a large hole in the area. I'm just wondering if that's something in the rebuttal you can elaborate on at all.
Absolutely. To the west of the building where I plan to live, I have several new friendships and old friendships. And one just invested in another 5 acres close to this mining operation from Mountain Road over, if you will. And he has said that his livelihood has been altered and changed. And that had to do with the deer going through his hunting stand and how the deer are acting differently, dramatically different. I already have, and you have, a letter that states that this will probably negatively impact a woman's apiary operation. We know there's a word that's come out since 2008 called solastasia. It's when you lose the sense of solace and comfort in your home. We already know, those of us who have written letters, we are losing. We are getting solastasia. The comfort and peace that we have come to expect is challenged. So if that's not a biological response, I don't know what is.
I believe the question was relative to tree trimming.
Let's go down that path.
Any?
The evergreens are gone. The evergreens are gone in that picture. The hardwoods have been scathed.
In that lot, on that lot.
In the big yellow square that we're talking about. Yep. All those green trees essentially are gone.
Well, they're either gone or they're not. What do you mean by essentially?
No, I mean, there's like I think Tom quoted like a 15-foot width or something he left or something. Yeah, I can submit that picture on another day.
Vinny, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Biz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Julianne, this is Richard Burley. Could you mention again what you were talking about when you said that you're planning on gardening and doing gardening on your property, and also orchard? You mentioned something about orchard up on the L-shaped part. Could you just say again what your intentions are on that?
Yes. I see great potential to nurture the buffer between my home and the large commercial buildings. I've seen that all along. In our purchasing that light industrial lot, we were pleasantly surprised by the biodiversity, the canopy. You can almost see the mottled color over in the left part. That's deciduous trees, hardwood trees. They're beautiful. I think we have one of the tallest trees on our lot right there. I know that some of the oldest apple trees on the island are on that lot. And they were nurtured probably by the homesteader in the house that I've bought. That small 2-room shack on facade is probably the one that planted those orchards. Can't say for sure. I fully intend to work with the nonprofit on the island to create an apple from the island. I've already had the sugars tested on the apples from the island, which I brought home. They were tested by one of the finest cider people in the country. I don't know how to say that. And she said the sugars are incredibly perfect. It was my intention before COVID to be up there to cut young nurtured branches over the winter before they start sapping. Scion wood. The scion wood is brought back and put on root wood. The root wood then is brought to the condition that it most probably will thrive in. This is exactly what that property is good for. This was my intention. This threatens everything about that. Let's just say there's a season when the dust can fly. Is there a good season? Are the trees dormant when he does this? I'm not sure. I'm very concerned about the driveway. Very concerned about the driveway. There's nothing good that can come with that kind of movement right and left. You ask me about what I want to do on my property. I want to nurture it. If it means that I have to take from this meeting and go back in a negotiation to somebody, and I don't know who it is, and unzone my light industrial so that I can have an orchard, which is not what I have to do, by the way, then I'll do it. If the action requires me unzoning my light industrial to take away some predisposition, I'll do it. This is not what we want to continue to do, is build light industrial.
Okay, thank you then. In regards to the orchard, and I don't know if you're going to be gardening, then I think it's natural then that you would use sprays. You would have to spray to control the pests and the stuff on your orchard and on your gardening.
No, sir. I'm an organic grower and I have been for 20 years. It's my pedigree. I am not a chemical person. And I can assure you, if you did a background check, you'd be looking at Mother Earth.
So you don't use any chemicals at all?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
I wouldn't go there.
Any other questions for Julianne? Thank you, Julianne. Ted, do you wish to rebuttal?
Yeah, I just want to say something about the adjoining parcel that Tom Jordan also owns with the buildings on it that are, I would say that one is maybe 30 feet from our property line, if that. I can throw a stone and hit it. And I'm 64 years old. So if that becomes part of the mining operation, Tom has already said that he's going to use the driveway. He's already said he's going to use those buildings to store his equipment. In my mind, I'm not a lawyer. That makes it part of the mining operation. It is less than 30 feet from our property line. Where's our buffer? Where's our buffer from the mining operation? It appears that there can't possibly be a buffer there. I was under the impression that the buffer had to be at least 50 feet. Maybe you can help me with that. Thank you.
Any questions, Ken?
Yeah, that brings up a good point. When they talk about storing the equipment, and now they've already spoke, but I suppose I can ask the question. When they say store their equipment off-sites on the parcel to the south, what are they talking about for equipment? They're not talking about a crusher. They're not going to take a crusher off there and stick it in a building every night. What are they talking about for storing their equipment?
Yeah, unmute Tom.
Are we there yet?
Normally we wouldn't do that, but yes, that's a valid question. I was wondering as well that there's no apparent equipment being left on site. So if you can get unmute Tom.
Tom, you're unmuted if you want to answer Dave's question.
I currently store my payloader there in one dump truck, and that's all the equipment that I would store there.
That's it.
Thank you.
So may I say something?
Back to Ted.
Ted here. So there will be no storing of fuel, whatever else is needed for mining. I don't have the knowledge of that. My main concern comes with the buffer. It seems like that becomes a part of the mining operation, and I have no buffer. And the driveway. I mean, it just seems wrong to me. It seems that it's not legal.
Any other questions for Ted? Vinny? Nothing, Vinny? Oh, okay. Thank you, Ted. Jim? Give a second for us to unmute you.
Oh, sorry, unmuted.
Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Attorney James Smith, 1236 Bluebird Street, Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Just a few comments here. Mostly with regard to the rebuttal provided by Mr. Parent and the applicant Julian with regard to the property value. Again, and I know I harped on this earlier, but their testimony was rife with the terms think, believe, anecdotal evidence. I spoke to a guy, I heard from somebody. The fact of the matter is that so many neighbors writing in opposing the mine is evidence that the mine will make the surrounding properties less valuable. The testimony that, well, I never heard of a property sell or lose value because of a quarry, that's all fine and well if you're chatting with your neighbor, man on the street, but it's anecdotal at best. The size of the proposed mine may be smaller than that what was studied, but it doesn't mean that there is a different result, and that is based on not anecdotal evidence, but objective hard data. The second item I'd like to address is the location of the driveway, or proposed location, I guess. Mr. Jordan, I believe, indicated that the driveway was chosen for the benefit of the neighbors because, this way, if you were driving by, you wouldn't be able to look down the driveway and see the mine. And that's all well and good, but I can't help but feel that is perhaps a bit disingenuous because the driveway also conveniently goes right by where he'll be storing his equipment. There are a number of other ways you can make the mine not visible from the road, including having a squiggly or a snake or S-shaped drive. But I think the most convenient path is the one that goes right by the large pole buildings where he'll be storing his mining equipment, which happen to be approximately 30 feet from Ted and Julianne's property. And that sums it up.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
There were questions
Ken.
from Ryan about that. They keep talking about, thank you, Mr. Chairman. They keep talking about the setback, that it's not enough. Do the current setbacks on that parcel that has the easement road that they're gonna use, the way I understand it, once or twice, 3 or 4 times a week? We're not talking heavy traffic by any stretch of the imagination. Is the setback there legal, and for them parking a truck and a payloader, is that okay?
I have to check with the perimeter setbacks if that's going to be considered part of the mine. I mean, it's not technically part of the mine; it's almost like an accessory building. So I can check the accessory.
Well, you said earlier that other operators store their equipment off-site from the mine.
Right.
And you don't consider those storage areas
To be part of the mine.
to be part of the mine. So
Right.
I would imagine this would be the same. So, but it is important for us to know whether those setbacks on that property are legal
And present as approved as the original buildings were.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so Mariah's taking a quick look at the code. I think part of your question is, are the buildings currently in site legal and meeting code?
Yeah. Also, are they a legally located building?
If I understand correctly, they're only a couple of years old, so one would.
Hope so.
So in general agriculture, accessory building is supposed to be 50 feet from the lot lines.
This is light industrial zone though.
Oh, that's right. That one is. I'm sorry. In light industrial building on the side.
Okay.
Actually 10 for an accessory structure.
So they're well within.
They meet the current setbacks.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so the structures themselves as presented are not in violation, I think is what you were heading for, right? Okay.
Currently.
Well, they're listed as storage buildings. Are there any other questions for Jim? Vinny? None, okay. Thank you. That closes this hearing, a little longer than I think most of us were expecting. As discussed earlier, the question was, should we go right into our regular meeting to talk on to make a decision on this? I would be looking for an opinion of the committee because we did receive a tremendous number of pages at many cases just this morning. They were submitted correctly, just that we didn't see them until this morning. Is there possibly a feeling of wanting to push a decision to this actually off to the next meeting? Or make a decision right now, keep in mind that we don't intend to have a meeting at the moment for the 18th.
No, I'm okay with the decision. For myself.
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Okay. Sounds to be a majority, so I would be looking for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the conditional use permit as requested, but we will come up with some
The local conditions. We had a set of conditions from the last quarry. We had a set of conditions submitted as a opposition document.
Was there a second though?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking for a second. I'm looking for a second. Ooh. I'll second for discussion.
Okay, so in this meeting, the only conditions that were listed were basically the standard it's got to be established within 12 months. And I can find the page if you want. The conditions that were attached to the quarry last month are on page 11 of this packet.
Of the first one?
Yes. So hours, which they've testified that they'd be willing to have different hours from over here. And again, these are just an example. This is what we normally play. Medium soil water.
Yes, Vinnie?
I'm sorry, it's hard to know for sure if someone's talking, so I didn't mean to interrupt. I just have a question about, as far as conditions that the opposition suggested, that Ted suggested specifically, and Jim Smith had some in his information as well. If we can at some point in the discussion go through what we are even able to put on as conditions, and just the statement of that if it's something covered by, a state regulation, then we cover that by saying they must meet their DNR stormwater plan, for example.
That was one of my concerns as well, because some of those items are clearly not within our normal jurisdiction.
Right, so
go on.
What I did was I just pulled back up the staff report for this project, which again, the only two conditions that were written into the staff report when it was written, which was probably 2 months ago, were that it used to be established within 12 months, that's an ordinance standard, that's non-negotiable. And then that they would comply with all applicable local, state, and federal codes and ordinances, including obtaining all required approvals and permits prior to mining.
I got to interrupt you for a second. Yes, I got to interrupt you for a second. Remember, we had an individual that we allowed to communicate they expressed an interest and not that their concerns were addressed. Did they want any rebuttal?
Thank you for checking. They texted back and said they were in the road and they lost the call, but they think that all their stuff.
Okay. Good. I apologize for missing that.
So I would assume you want these two conditions.
Correct.
And then now I'm going to go to the conditions that were for the hearing that you had last month for the other mine. So you can see this is on page 11 in the same packet. So yeah, keep that here. So yeah, it's the same. The first two are the same. Hours of operation. They've testified that they are okay with Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. So I don't know if you want that. I think the opponents had requested something
9 to 5. I thought that's what 8 to 5 sound acceptable.
Can I ask a quick just procedure question before we go through each condition? We maybe didn't go through the criteria for even putting the motion forward because the motion was put forward right away? Or are we going to take some time to go through, did they meet their evidence that was required?
Technically, yeah. So I've scooched up even further in the minutes from the previous, based on Wisconsin Act 67. The question of whether or not substantial evidence was provided is supposed to be part of your discussion or deliberation. As to what was on, right on both sides. Are you talking about actually walking through the worksheet though, Vinny?
Well, I just didn't know if we were supposed to present that after he's made the motion or if it should have been presented before the motion. And then I just didn't want to spend a lot of time on all these conditions if we aren't on the same page with substantial evidence being presented. But I'm happy with whatever works. I just didn't know what the right timing was to do that.
I think you're appropriate that we should bring up that list in one, go through it quick.
Worksheet?
Yeah.
19 minutes.
Yeah.
Unless she has a specific item she wants to address.
Is there a specific set of items, or are you just looking to go through the procedures? We lost.
Yeah, I have a couple of items. Yep. Do you want me to do that now, or?
Yeah, why don't you? Because
she's having difficulty.
Well, I'm not in the planning drive, so I can think of it.
So please do.
Okay, thank you. I felt item number one, the proposed, whether the proposed project adversely affected property values in the area. I did feel that the opponents presented a much more, they met the burden of proof where the applicant did not. They did not give us any materials or evidence about property value at all. So I think that I would give them a no, that they did not meet burden of proof as an applicant. And then also, let me go down the list here quick. I had another one. A lot of these don't apply. They don't have buildings or lighting and things like that. So I understand. Several of these we wouldn't even discuss. Provisions for surface drainage, that's covered in the stormwater plan. I see that. The proposed buildings contribute to visual harmony with existing buildings in the neighborhood and scale and design. Again, it's not buildings, it's the whole project. They kind of explained how they might meet that. Sorry, I'm going through here quick in the moment. And then whether the proposed leads to a major natural character change of the area with removal of vegetation, alteration of topography. I guess I don't see how any mine could not do that. So maybe we want to discuss it or not. I also see that the impact to public safety and health as far as the mitigation of dust and general environmental health. There were some things given on those, but I guess we want to start with property value, and anyone has topics on that or thoughts on that.
I do. I have a rebuttal to all this.
Go right ahead.
I think the people that spoke against it were extremely off base. They did not give proof. Look at the pictures, if you will, on 122, 123.
Page,
the second. 124. The pictures and the scope they used to present their case to stop the project. How ridiculous is that when we're talking about a little 4-acre parcel? These things are hundreds of acres. It's not even close to the same. Nobody in their right mind could think that that's what they're talking about on Washington Island.
Blasting nearly every day.
Yes, that's just, I'm sorry. I'm wound up because it's such an extreme case of misrepresentation by Lawyer Smith. That's just wrong. He knows that that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a little 4-acre parcel. And so I think the burden of proof was much better addressed by the applicants. As far as the dragonfly, that will be regulated by the state, okay, the DNR. And he's right, there's 1,500 acres there. Is Attorney Smith and the other couple saying that they should be forced to leave their property because they're in that watershed too, or that area where they could affect the dragonfly? No, they don't care to leave. Well, no. And the safety data on page 22, wait a minute here, and I'll read that. Attorney Smith talked about conjecture and what do you call it? The terminology that they were, some of the terms Mr. Smith used, it's may potentially, if he wasn't dealing in concretes. If you read the section 2, warning, it says crushed limestone is not a known health hazard, okay? However, crushed limestone, and this is what he cites, may be subjected to various natural mechanics. May, he's grasping at straws there. Then it says it may contain crystalline silica particles less than 10, okay? And it may cause damage to lungs through prolonged related exposure, in other words, working at it. I can tell you, and I know you don't want to hear it, Vinny, but my dad knew the stone business. He learned it. His grandfather started out in a mine in Pennsylvania, and the workers there told him, "Get out of the mine here because this is granite and hard stone. You'll get silicosis after a while. Go somewhere else." In limestone, it turns to dust. It doesn't present a problem. I used to work at Thermotronics. When I go home at night and I take my shower, blow my nose, sorry to be graphic,
Some of those dust.
But it was just black. And yet Thermotron was fine to operate. There's no question there. But at the quarry, I go home and shower up, blow my nose. There's no problem. Nothing. It's clear. And they're grasping at straws with this. That was page 22, the safety data, to say it may. Hey, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be 22 years old again and 6'8" and an all-star basketball player. I don't think that's going to happen. And you know, this, no. And the mine next door to her house, no, it's well beyond her house. It's a small operation. No, I think they, she claims it's a big deal. A 4-acre quarry, and it's going to be reclaimed. They have to keep all they take off and expose. They have to keep that product, and they have to put it back. That's a state and a county program, and the county monitors it. I have to pay to have my quarry, and I have to pay to have my reclamation plan. That's all taken care of. So I think the burden of proof was, and that's why I made the motion right away, because I understand the business, and I listened to it, and any burden of proof, the applicant was far and away in the right there. So sorry to get wound up, but I am wound up on this one.
Any more comments?
Okay, well, we all have our thoughts on it as well. And I just, I'm curious, the one I particularly brought up was property value. And I guess maybe am I taking burden of proof too literally, because I didn't see one single item from the applicant about property value. Not a note, not a sentence, nothing they really were saying about it, that they had asked any property owners or had looked at any data to see what the impact might be. So I just in that particular one, did I miss something they presented?
The applicant stated that they had been in the real estate business for 20 years. And at one time there were what they say, 6 quarries, active quarries in Washington Island or on Washington Island. And never once in his 20 years did anybody complain about property values next to an existing mine. So, and on a small scale like that, no, I don't see a problem with it. And like I say, if you look at those pictures on 122, 123, 124, that the Smith used to claim even a half of 1% decline in property values, that was bizarre that he would even put something like that in front of us. That's an insult to our intelligence, as far as I'm concerned. Because it's not the same. I mean, those quarries are just about as big as Washington Island itself.
Maybe just a second here, Roy.
Yes, I think the applicants did a great job as far as protecting the property values of other people. First of all, they retained the hardwood forest. In fact, it was mentioned that the beautiful hardwood forest on the west side of that property. It does note that they are taking some of the trees off. 20% of the hardwoods on the far east side. And they did a great job of covering up the mine by putting the driveway at a 90-degree angle from the mine, so you can't see the mine. The only way you're going to be able to see that mine is from the air. And so I believe the mine is going to be you won't even know it's there.
The reality is basically if we had to say real estate resale value, there's always going to be somebody that's not going to like something. There's always going to be somebody that likes something. It's difficult. I've been here just as long as much of my life. I may not have been born here, but I've been here the majority of my life, and I've known plenty of people that bought property in the 60s and doesn't like what the county looks like in the 80s, so they sell it to somebody that likes what it looks like in the 80s and didn't like it in the 2000s, so they sold it to somebody that liked what it looked in the 2000s.
And now they wish they had it back.
Yeah, so it is a difficult item. It is a dramatic change on a road, but I don't think the applicant did a bad job either. It may have been verbal, but they did, and they are making an effort. I mean, they are sharing a driveway. That's why I asked about the easement.
I would want the restrictions though to include They must get all the permits from the county and the state before they turn over one shovel full of dirt. And I think that's the way it would be anyway.
Yes, I think it would also be important to add in anything with the Heinz Emerald Dragonfly, which is a federally regulated endangered species. So that goes to the Fish and Wildlife.
Yep.
So this is Mariah, what I've pulled up on the screen now is the letter from the neighbor opponents, but I'm just gonna, for the audience and RPC's sake, rattle off the conditions that we've already looked at on the screen that I think you think are applicable. So, that it's gotta be established within a year. They need to comply with everything that applies before they start doing anything. And I think we would spell it right, but I think we need to spell out a separate one that's about the Heinz Emerald Dragonfly, comply with the DNR and US Fish and Wildlife. Hours of 8 to 5, complying with what Greg Coulter's has outlined in his memo, downlighting, if there is going to be any downlighting, and then like all conditional use permits, they have to record an affidavit with the deed that details the conditions so that next owners would know what they are. But now I've pulled up, I think you said you wanted to look at the gardener's letter with the conditions they had suggested, so I pulled that up.
Well, that was part of what Vinny, I think, was referencing was there are some items listed there that may be controlled underneath the federal and or state issues that are not really our world, but we should at least be aware of.
So I believe, and Ken, you might be able to chime in here better than I can, but I think number 3.
And what page is that on again?
This is in the second packet, it's on pages 14 and 15.
Okay.
But I believe that number 3, number 5, oh, no, wait, that's the schedule. Okay, so number 3. I think number
3 is in there, that's.
I'm naming off the ones I think that you guys don't have any control over. But I'm saying you should chime in if I'm wrong, one way or the other. But yeah, I think number 3, I think number 6, number 7, and number 10 would all be covered by state and federal regulations regarding mining and blasting, I think.
That would be my
Unless I'm
interpretation.
just reading some of them.
Vinny, were there ones on there that you were?
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
I forgot which ones I said. Did anybody write those down? So wait.
Well, let's just go through one. Just go one by one.
Okay.
Maximum. I don't see that we can appropriately put a condition of anything like that.
I think technically you probably could, but I have no idea what that would be. I don't know what an appropriate amount would be.
Well,
that was in their plan already.
Yeah, they've got the size of the quarry dictated.
And you can only take so much stone out of it.
You can only take so much out, and sometimes you go deeper, but you run into stone that's not good for the purposes you're looking for. All right, for crushing, and we hear that from Kologi at Highway.
In our pits.
Yeah, he'll go down far enough and they'll run out of the good stone. What they hit is not good for crushing. So they'll hit the same thing. So I think we did one at our quarry and found out that the quality of stone goes downhill fast at about 12 feet. So
Consensus of not being worried about that?
I'm not too worried about it.
Okay.
Number 2, maximum amount of hours. We're going to do 8 to 5. I think that's reasonable, really. 8 o'clock is normal business
For
hours.
the little amount they say they're going to need it there, that's fine.
Number 3, professional fair. Again, I think that's part of the other obligations of a mine.
That's right. I keep trying to get that one to stay at the top, and it doesn't.
At least you can roll. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that's related to setbacks and buffers and site plans, everything else is either in the zoning ordinance already or in the reclamation plan, the site plan.
Use of adjacent parcel. It's a storage building.
Yeah, Mariah already said that we do allow that with other mines, so.
other businesses.
I will say, I mean, you could, if you wanted to say that they're not allowed to have material processing and storage or offices there without explicit approval, I guess. I don't know if any mines that I can think of that have offices and storage building next to it.
We want to store product there.
No.
No, we can't store.
So basically, we're okay with equipment being stored there, but not operated on, but not materials.
Right.
And not office activities.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
Did you hear that, Vinny?
Yes, I'm reading the list as well. And material processing, how would that be defined?
So that means to me it would be like stockpiling, crushing operations, sorting.
Right, because those would be mining.
Those are mining activities, and this would just be reiterating that they are not approved for that lot.
Right. So crushing screens.
In similar quarry operations.
And yeah, and then number 5, that's already a state law. If they're going to blast, they have to come to all the local property owners. They've got to go through the homes, take videos, and document that building before, and they've got to get that done before they be in the blaster. So the blaster has to do that before they can blast.
There's a reason why that's usually a separate business now rather than included in your operation.
Does it provide the neighbors a schedule? Because that's part of what this is.
They're told when the blasting is going to occur.
Yeah, I've seen documentation in one of my towns I worked with. They were pretty thorough.
Oh yeah. Well, they've got to be because they are the blaster is responsible.
Yeah. Number 6 would be within your items, right? Normal.
6 is anything that relates to wells and water quality and that sort of thing. I think it's regulated by the state.
Air scrubbers would be similar.
Traffic. I guess you could make it clear that your hours of operation are supposed to include all traffic.
To me, that's the hours of operations.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't foresee how you can get in and out of a quarry that's got hours of 8 to 5 with equipment at 10 o'clock at night.
No.
I think the last time we did put something in there about air brakes or J brakes, whatever they're called.
It's a short run.
Yeah.
If the town doesn't control that now on the road today, then we know.
I don't know. And then I think number 9 is the only one left that's not controlled by the state. Number 10, I believe, is everything to do with reclamation.
Yeah, and 9 I would just forego because, like Roy said earlier, going in from that other parcel and turning into the quarry keeps it from being seen.
It's a single driveway rather than 2. And they're going to build up the existing driveway, I understood. So is there something we can say that they implement their driveway plan?
I mean, you want to just reiterate that they show an easement, or you mean?
Well, the easement, I guess the easement needs to exist, yes. There's no doubt about it. And whatever verbiage is relative to the quarry operations, no other access would be allowed, and that's the intended access. But what I'm saying is they were talking about removing the existing lower quality road surface, and they were building a new one to accommodate this and the storage use.
We already have, the zoning ordinance has driveway requirements as far as like surfacing and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so that should take care of that kind of concern.
Right. I guess it would be, do you want a condition that has to be the driveway? Like if for some reason they decided to sell that parcel.
I think our general incentive is that is the driveway for that purpose, for that conditional use.
Something else, they just come back and ask for.
Okay, yeah, exactly. A change to the site.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sound right, Vinny?
Yes, I just have one, when we're done, a clarification on the Heinz Emerald issue. It's just that kind of looking at it as they will not destroy, degrade, alter, or fragment the habitat. I like that as a condition because I don't know if U.S. Fish and Wildlife is going to come do some extensive study on Washington Island to determine this. But if it was determined that the operation did degrade the habitat and was having a bad effect, then that would be a condition to not keep the permit. This is looking at a 10 to 20 year, if not longer, permit. So I think it's an important part.
I got destroyed, degrade. What was the other verb you used?
Sorry about that. The applicant affirmatively demonstrate that the purpose to use will not destroy, degrade, alter, or fragment Hind Emerald Dragonfly critical habitat.
On premise. Is that what your intent?
Activities on.
Is your intent of on-premise activities or 100 acres away?
Well, I think there's a misunderstanding about Heinz Emerald Dragonfly entirely, and I know maybe you're tired of talking about it, but it doesn't, the water from that site doesn't flow across the surface in a typical format you would imagine. When you're dealing with the groundwater, it's going straight through whatever crack or crevice is available, straight to those springs and marshes. So it doesn't matter what percent of land is being used out of that whole 1,500 acres, and it doesn't matter the distance from those marshes. What matters is the size of the cracks in the bedrock and what's put on the surface, including the items from stirring up the surface and removing the topsoil. So I don't know how to define that better, but the critical habitat, that's why it has that buffer on our county map that shows what the critical habitat is and what the suggested buffer around it is. It's to protect that habitat. It's the whole area. It's not just their land.
And that's what I thought you meant. I just wanted you to clarify that.
Thank you.
Any further comments, suggestions, alterations? I think Vinny's got our last one on that item. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
We didn't hear you.
I didn't. What did you say? I'm sorry.
All in favor.
All in favor of what?
All in favor of the motion on the table with the conditions presented.
Okay, I'm going to say no. Thank you.
Okay, so 4-1.
So that takes care of.
Now,
Yes,
if I may, and Vinny brought up, and rightly so, that we should go through that.
The list.
The list. However, a lot of those questions on that list are subjective to an individual, and that individual could use that to come up with one thing they don't like about a project to kill it. And I find that wrong. Okay. If I didn't want something to go through, I could pick out one item and say, I don't believe they did this, that they should have, or I give more credence to the person going one way or the other.
It is unfortunate we deal with very public-minded issues, and that list does, however, give us a pattern in order for us to follow. So
what I'm saying is, one person.
It is.
You can look at 2 people, 3 people can look at the same thing, and those 3 people can come up with 3 different ideas or interpretations of it. All right, and because of that, I kind of have a problem with it.
But remember, and one thing that I just made a note to myself to start doing is that we should put so that the audience can see it, or a blank version of your community's permit worksheet in the packets, because if you'll remember, it's not that you have to, under Act 67, deny something if you find that somebody didn't meet the burden of proof on a particular thing. You weigh the evidence that was presented to you, and then if you feel like, even if, if you can come up with a condition that alleviates or minimizes the concern that's been raised, that's still allowable. I'll start putting a copy of the sheet.
Okay, so what you're saying is, just because an applicant is there asking for something, and you've got people saying they don't want it for whatever reason, you can't just take one item out of that list, or there's 17 of them or something like that. We can't take just one item, isolate that, so they didn't do, the applicant failed here. Just because of that one thing doesn't give us the right really to turn it down.
You can if you think it's significant enough with regard to that project, and if you think there's no condition that you could attach that would fix it.
Yes.
So in some, it might be that you've got a conditional use permit where you have one item you think, that actually means that we should grant this one. Or you might have one where there's like 6 that you think that, those might be problems, but there are conditions that will attach that will fix those things. Right. So it's, as Grant was saying,
it is a difficult seat we sit in sometimes.
Yes, it is.
So that being said, let's move on to our next item. Do we know if we have the individuals that were most interested in speaking actually still connected?
Probably, but we're just going to be winging it on some of these. I can't tell who the comments are.
Do you want to take your 5 minutes to prepare and get ready?
I think we just need like 2, unless everybody wants to go.
Let's take a couple minute break here real quick.
What page does that start on?
Well, the notice that he's going to read is on page 14, and then the actual packet is page 68.
Okay.
We'll should probably do that pretty quick. We'll should probably do that pretty quick. It'll be right after their discussion on this one.
All right.
Meeting is up.
You do it.
But so you're not playing.
Could influence. You can't do that before the hearing.
That's right.
So
This is all the Joel.
I thought I'd be able to see it. But the knowledge is
That's what
usually
and that's okay. Joel said, you guys need
Okay.
Well, let me see.
he was not. We're not live here, are we?
Yeah, you are.